Spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.
We are determined to tackle this. Most of our people are great people, but we've been too weak at getting rid of the ones who aren't.
A damning new report reveals a dereliction of duty by the Metropolitan Police to keep London safe, including revelations that several officers who failed background checks were taken on to boost diversity, later to be convicted of heinous sex crimes, including against children. Has positive discrimination become not only divisive and illogical, but dangerous? Also tonight.
Banking has been happening on a very, very big scale across this country, and it is men and women running small businesses, above all, that are being targeted.
The debanking scandal continues as it is exposed that last year had the highest rate of account closures on record, affecting nearly 500,000 customers. In all of these cases, financial crime was cited as the reason, but Nigel Farage, who broke the scandal in 2023, blamed European legislation for the practice. Is debanking an affront to free speech, or should private companies be allowed to serve whom they want? Plus,
they are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. That is...
Protests erupting in Minneapolis after the fatal shooting of a woman by an agent of President Trump's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The incident has led to outrage from both sides, with many expressing anger at an unnecessary use of life-threatening force and others supporting law enforcement's response to the woman's actions. Who is in the right? Also,
Nigel Farage is a snake oil salesman.
The single greatest threat is the agenda of Nigel Farage.
We must call his scheme racist.
a war of words has broken out between Rachel Reeves and Reform. The Chancellor accused Nigel Farage of racism for wanting to prioritise British-born people for welfare. And Reform's Zia Youssef hit back, calling Miss Reeves an ethno-nationalist for implying only white people are British-born. Is Reform exposing the left for blatant hypocrisy, or has the row escalated into absurdity? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most phlogistically prognosticating panel, Labour peer Lord Cryer and the former Conservative Special Advisor James Price. As always, let me know what you think, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Bowen.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. The headlines at 8:02. A rare red weather warning has been issued for parts of England as Storm Goretti bears down on the UK. Winds are expected to suddenly surge, potentially reaching 100 miles an hour later this evening, with the Met Office warning there's a danger to life. More than 25,000 homes in the southwest of England are currently without power, according to the National Grid's website, and dozens of schools have already been closed for tomorrow. Forecasters say Goretti is rapidly intensifying into a so-called weather bomb, with rare red wind warnings also enforced for Jersey and avalanche alerts issued for Snowdon in Wales. Those pictures on your screen from Cornwall. More on that breaking weather story as we get it throughout tonight. Speaking from the White House a short while ago, Vice President J.D. Vance said that President Trump stands with all law enforcement officers after a woman was fatally shot by a US immigration agent in Minneapolis. The Department of Homeland Security says 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good was a violent rioter who tried to run over immigration and customs enforcement officers. They claim the agent fired in self-defence. But local leaders have flatly rejected that account. Protests have erupted in the city throughout the day. Speaking a short while ago, Vice President J.D. Vance hit out at reporting of the incident, saying Miss Good's death was a tragedy of her own making.
This was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. Media wants to tell the truth. They ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE. I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers.
Protests are continuing across Iran this evening as President Trump threatens the country with hell if protesters are targeted. In an interview today, the president said that he'll hit Iran very hard if they start killing protesters. At least 21 people, including security forces, have been killed since the demonstrations began, according to local media reports. There are further reports tonight that there is an internet blackout in place across the country, with pictures showing large crowds gathering in Tehran. More on that throughout the evening. And ministers are preparing to U-turn on business rates for pubs, with fresh support expected to be announced in the coming days, GBNews understands. The industry had been bracing for steep rises after plans were unveiled to end COVID-era discounts, prompting warnings that many pubs simply wouldn't survive. Now, government sources say a new package is coming, likely to include rates relief and cuts to licensing red tape after an outcry from landlords. Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden says ministers recognise how economically and culturally important pubs are, but Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says the move is too little, too late. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Jacob.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Well, welcome back to Save the Nation. A damning new report in the Metropolitan Police has revealed that in a push to hit diversity targets, basic safety checks were ignored and dangerous criminals became policemen. The Metropolitan Police hired officers who had failed vetting to meet quotas for ethnic minority recruits. That included people with serious allegations against them, including Cliff Mitchell, who had been accused of raping a child. His application was rejected, but a special panel set up to meet diversity targets overruled the decision. Then, while serving as a constable, he went on to commit repeated sexual offences, including against children. He is now in prison for life. The report shows that more than 5,000 officers and staff were recruited without proper background checks, and thousands more had references ignored. Over 100 officers who initially failed vetting were later allowed in, and 25 of them went on to commit crimes or misconduct. The problem goes beyond a few reprehensible individuals and derelictions of duty. When reaching arbitrary diversity targets take priority over safety, the public inevitably loses. When numbers and quotas matter more than character and integrity, lives are put at risk and trust in the police is undermined. Recruitment ought to be colour-blind and solely merit-based. Positive discrimination that overrides vetting concerns is reckless and dangerous. Standards and requirements must be the same for everyone, regardless of gender, ethnic or religious background or sexual orientation. This report must be taken as a warning. Ideology cannot override common sense, and quotas must not replace judgment. When the goal is to hit a percentage rather than protect the public, it is the public who will suffer. The Metropolitan Police says it has fixed these issues and tightened vetting, but diversity targets are wrong in principle, as they inevitably distort selection procedures. As ever, let me know what you think, mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm very pleased now to be joined by the political commentator Fahima Mohamed and my panel, Lord Cryer and James Price. Fahima, thank you very much for coming in. It does seem here as if in a desire to meet diversity targets, the Metropolitan Police just appointed people who weren't properly vetted. It had another problem, that its vetting wasn't being very well done anyway. But this is surely a bad way of recruiting people, that you want to be utterly colourblind in recruitment.
I don't think that we need to just talk about the culture wars here. We need to look about and talk mainly about the scandal, how it has been through history. If you look at from the 1970s right up to the Macpherson era, It has always been a problem with vetting. And the fact that in the last 10 years, there's always been an influx on quotas beyond even DEI. DEI is only one factor. The problem here is that the safeguarding is failed. The processes has not ever been for a long time where it actually has been given the right kind of funding and processes to be, in line.
But what I'd argue back against that is that two wrongs don't make a right, that there are failings within the Metropolitan Police that are well known, have been commented on, the first report is well known, but that then by going for targets to try and put it right has made the problem worse because it has built in a different type of discrimination into the Metropolitan Police.
But then again, I think even if it wasn't DEI quotas, it would have been something else, would have still created the issues if vetting wasn't in place. Vetting under the Equalities Act is meant to be, for everyone. There is no such thing as just because it's DEI, you are mixing it with regards to that because, it's becoming a political sort of excuse when we're not addressing the real issue.
You're quite right. There are two issues here. There is the failure of vetting, and then there's the deliberate overriding of vetting to meet DEI quotas. You're quite right that there are both of those, but it seems to me the second is equally reprehensible, that you shouldn't have been overriding vetting to meet quotas, and actually you shouldn't have quotas in the first place.
Yes.
You should employ the best people.
100%, I do agree with that, but DEI is not an issue. I think when we talk about DEI, it's about just having inclusivity, equality, and if it's done in the correct manner, it wouldn't matter. The problem is the process and the broken systems that has been failing since Conservative and before.
But surely if you've got a system where everyone is equal under the law, and that there is an open recruitment process, and make sure that you put adverts in papers and outlets and online that are seen by a wide cross-section of the community, then you don't need DEI to be inserted into it. That creates a different form of discrimination, but nonetheless a discrimination.
Not necessarily, because again, before DEI, there was not the actual representation. DEI has come in. It is not just about race. It's not just about representation. It's also about inclusivity, people that are neurodiverse, people that, come from maybe disabilities. So, people always look at it as just a race factor. So this is something, again, which we need to take away from DEI. If you had a wife that is pregnant, for example, she's not going to be discriminated against going into work after, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is that she takes time off. So that's what we need to understand. The DEI is not the issue. Again, I will reiterate that it's the processes. And if we are going to frame it and make it a culture war, we're not going to actually address the real issues that needs actual, reinforcement of reform.
Let me bring my panel in. John, this is another failure of the Metropolitan Police, isn't it? They just seem to get everything wrong. What can be done to make it a better, more effective police force?
It's difficult to say. You're right. There's been a series of failures. In this particular case, Clifford Mitchell apparently went through a vetting process, but after being rejected was still referred to the inclusivity panel. That's my understanding.
That's right. He was I think he's one 25 out of 100 who were rejected, taken on for inclusivity reasons, and then went on to commit offences or misdemeanours.
Common sense would have told people at the Met, surely we should have rejected him at the vetting stage because the vetting process weeded him out, and that's what vetting's there for. Most of all the sort of really earth-shattering cases that we've heard in recent years, Carrick, for instance, springs to mind. With almost all of them, they tended to be white, but also the Met missed various opportunities to get rid of them over the years, and Carrick was allowed to carry on and offend and offend and offend. I would just add one thing, having said that, we police by consent in this country, and on that basis, the police force should sort of reflect the population that it serves. Now, when I was an MP, I represented a very, very mixed constituency, and the police force, and I think most of them had joined before the quotas, they, in my experience, the borough commanders were all white, but the officers I dealt with were every kind of ethnicity and every kind of colour.
James, is this a problem of DEI, or is it a problem of the Metropolitan Police, or is it simply society is asking the police to do impossible things?
Well, as Adam Smith said, there's a great deal of ruin in a nation, and I think there is as well in a police force. If there wasn't evidence of this, you would assume that the story that a black person was allowed into the police force despite being rejected for being inappropriate and not passing tests.
And an allegation of child abuse against him.
And then went on to go and confirm that he was indeed a child rapist and all these awful things he's now in prison for life for. If there wasn't evidence of that, you would assume that I'd be huffing car fumes. And it's such a mad kind of right-wing conspiracy type thing, and yet it's true. And I think that the people who overruled that rejection, we should probably know who they are. They should probably be not allowed to be involved in this process anymore, and they should share some level of the culpability of this. But so too should the Police and Crime Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police, who happens to be GBNews favourite Sir Sadiq Khan. I hope he's enjoying his knighthood with all of the crimes that are going on in this city. I think it's extraordinary that this kind of stuff is allowed to happen.
But is it a function of the police coming under the cosh for previous things that went wrong, like the Macpherson report, and then the leadership are told that the one thing you've got to do is ensure that we have a more representative police force? So you make sure that is your ambition rather than sensible vetting procedures. And it's a sort of public pressure that the police have responded to badly.
Yeah, I think there's always the danger of fighting the last war and overcorrecting, exactly as you say. But I think when you start having anything other than excellence or merit being a target and good performance, you're going to get perverse outcomes like this. You see it in schools and universities where great candidates are turned away in favour of other people. You see it in other walks of life as well. You see it in apprenticeship schemes that say, we're only going to let these people in. Well, if that happens, you're actually going to change the performance in any of those areas once you get to whether it's 18 or an adult life or the rest of it. If you care about equalising outcomes to different groups of people, whoever they are, invest the money in the early doors, because by the time kids get to 5 or 6 years old, it's almost too late. Put the money in there if you actually want to help better outcomes.
All right, well, thank you very much. The Assistant Commissioner, Rachel Williams, said, we are being open and transparent about past vetting and recruitment practices that led in some cases to unsuitable people joining the Met. We found that some historical practices did not meet the strengthened hiring and vetting standards we have today. We identified these issues ourselves and have fixed them quickly while making sure any risk to the public has been properly and effectively managed. You do wonder if they're this clever, why they make all these mistakes. Those sort of statements, it's all fine now, I'm afraid don't reassure me for an instant. Anyway, thank you very much to Fahima and to my panel. In a moment.
Debanking has been happening on a very, very big scale across this country, and it is men and women running small businesses, above all, that are being targeted.
The debanking scandal continues as it is exposed that last year had the highest rate of account closures on record. Is debanking an affront to free speech, or should private companies be allowed to serve whom they want?
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
More than 10 people have had to be rescued after a huge sinkhole opened in a canal in Shropshire, leaving several narrowboats stranded.
Yes, 3 boats have been affected by the incident, with at least 2 swallowed by the sinkhole, which is approximately 50 by 50 metres in size.
Extraordinary. Well, joining us with the story is Paul Smith-Story, who's on a canal boat 3 boats away from this sinkhole. Paul, this sort of thing doesn't really happen very often, does it?
It doesn't. There was a huge breach on the Bridgewater Canal last year, but this is the first time we've actually seen boats at the bottom of the breach. It was quite scary to witness, to be honest.
So how close are you? What can you see from where you are?
Yeah, well, we're about 90 metres away from where the sinkhole started. We got woke up at 4:20 this morning. There was crashing on the boat because the boat was listing. We got off, and a friend of ours told us that there was this sinkhole that had appeared and that there was a boat about to drop into it. And that was, when we got there, the boat was already in the bottom of this sinkhole. The rush of water was incredible. It just sounded like a huge waterfall. Luckily, those boaters got out, and we actually know the chap whose first boat went in. We're just so thankful that he got out in time with his dog.
Gosh, Paul, just explain what we're seeing on our screens. right now. So the narrow boat there has come out of the water that we see on the left, and it's sort of, has it rolled over and down into the sinkhole? What's going on?
That's the actual line where the red clay is the line of the canal. Just where those 3 trees are to the left is a field that's flooded, and I think that's where the water's escaped from the canal, and it's just flooded the field to the left of that image. It was really scary.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about woke policing and DEI, and the mail logs have come in. Marcus said, the media, led by successive government reports, have spent the last 30 years beating the Met with the institutionally racist stick at every opportunity. Now, the same media commentators are appalled that this has led to a desperate recruitment policy. Well, fair enough. Kelly, another example of the insidious, cancerous effect of cultural Marxism eating through all of our once effective and world-renowned institutions. And Richard, the moral panic about institutional racism by the College of Policing and Friends, generated by the report following the Stephen Lawrence case, has done huge amounts of damage. Well, another woke issue is the debanking scandal, which continues as new figures reveal that nearly 500,000 people, I'll say it again, nearly 500,000 people had their bank accounts closed last year, the highest number on record. In every case, banks cited financial crime concerns, but customers are often given little or no explanation. The issue first came into major public view in 2023, when Nigel Farage revealed he had been debanked by Coutts, but he now blames European regulation for making it easier for lenders to shut accounts. With tougher anti-money laundering rules, rising fraud costs and no legal right to a bank account in the UK, is this an affront to free speech, or should banks be able to choose to serve whomsoever they wish? Well, let me go to my panel, Lord Cryer and James Price. James, as a capitalist, I think businesses only have to do business with people they want to do business with. On the other hand, banks are quasi-monopolists. So it's a very difficult question, isn't it, of how far regulation should intrude?
I think that's absolutely right. As a capitalist myself, a good laissez-faire free marketeer, I used to be a lot more relaxed about this. And I think that the market would sort itself out, that sort of Gary Becker-style economics. You think, well, if these banks won't take you, someone else will stand up and do it. They will do better business. They will make more money. Their shareholders will be happier. And everything will work itself out because markets are very efficient, and that's great. My concern now is that there is so much regulation, leftover regulation from the EU, as we've just heard there, and the kind of terror of getting in trouble and the power of the regulators and all the rest of it. I think I've probably changed my mind, and I think Sir Michael Ellis, who was talking on Nigel's show before, had quite a good idea of making it the law that people are entitled to a bank account, or should have a bank account, because that not only gives the protection of that service to people, but also perhaps to the banks themselves. If someone else comes along and says, oh my God, I can't believe you're giving banking services to terrible James Price and Jacob Rees-Mogg, how could you? Well, it's the law, we've got to do it, and it gives them cover as well.
And the other difficulty is that our laws seem to me to be singularly ineffective. So both of us, and I don't know if you are as well, James, but the two of us are definitely politically exposed people. That means all our families are politically exposed people, including our siblings' children. I mean, it's very wide. And yet these laws were introduced to deal with heads of state in obscure places of the world ripping off their nation, not to deal with members of Parliament opening a bank account for their grandchild.
Well, you wouldn't have thought so. I mean, you and I aren't exactly Robert Mugabe, are we? But you might remember that I think we were both in the House of Commons when there was a debate on politically exposed persons, and you had MP, I think from all sides, MP after MP standing up and saying, well, I remember, sorry, I don't want to name her because obviously I'm not in touch with her, but it's a former MP, Conservative MP, who just about the last sort of person you could expect to be an organised criminal. She was standing, this matriarchal sort of figure, standing up, and she said, I banked with the same bank for 40 years, and I've just got a letter saying they're closing my account because I'm a PEP. But the other side, I mean, that is just ridiculous. Equally ridiculous. If I remember rightly, what happened with Nigel Farage's case he put in it's going back a few years, but from what I remember, he put in a subject access request, and he got all these documents coming back saying that NatWest, because ultimately the decision rested with NatWest, NatWest were debanking him on the basis that he didn't fit in with their ideological view of the world.
Yes, indeed.
And there were documents which said that. Well,
that's absolutely
right. We're all in favour of equality and all the rest of it, aren't we all? Well, funnily enough, at that point, NatWest were closing its last branch in my former constituency. And if they're all in favour of equality, you know what happens when you close a branch? The people you hit are the poor, the elderly, very often people from ethnic minority backgrounds, because they're unable to, you know, if English is your second language, you might not be able to go online. You have to go to a branch. If they're in favour of equality, keep your branches open so you've got access for those people, and stop closing accounts on the basis of somebody's beliefs, which has nothing to do with the head of NatWest Bank.
With their beliefs and with some businesses that you don't like. So people who have been involved in some Christian charities have got into difficulties, some hunts have got into difficulties because the business doesn't fit in. I dealt with a constituent who ran a pawnbroking business. They're obviously businesses that are at higher risk to money laundering and so on. And there's a low risk appetite and a feeling that they get into disproportionate trouble if they make a mistake, which puts pressure on them to close an account first and hear arguments about it second.
But of course, if you haven't got a bank account now, you can't really function either as a business or as an individual. You know, when I was a kid growing up in Keighley in West Yorkshire, I knew blokes, and we are talking about blokes, who would function on the basis of a cash economy. I mean, you know, they would pull out rolls of notes like that. That doesn't, well, maybe it does exist in some areas. But generally speaking, people need a bank account. And when you get debanked, your name will then go on a list which goes to all the other banks, and then you can't get.
And it's not just banks as well, other services as well. I was working on a political project even this week and got in touch with talking to some people who do logo designs and things like that, and they trotted out, very excited about it. They heard the nature of the project, and suddenly it was, we have a policy actually, and we don't do any political stuff at all. And I can't help but get the feeling that if it had been a nice cuddly lefty cause, then these people might not have minded so much that it was an evil old right-winger me over here. And you get, even, I think, something called B Corp that gives a sort of stamp on lots of products that says, we believe in X, Y, and Z and all the rest of it. And trying to show that you're morally virtuous on a very ambiguous set of morals becomes more important than actually the business of making money, which businesses do have a legal responsibility to try and do.
Indeed, but the numbers seem to me to be so high. There can't be 500,000 money launderers who have been miraculously caught by the banks. I have a feeling that the money launderers get away with it and never get caught, or at least if they're of any size. And the people who get stopped are people who it's just not worth the bank's while to check that they're actually bona fide. Or they don't like their politics.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And again, you would hope with 500,000 potential customers out there that some enterprising GBNews viewer is thinking of setting up their own challenger bank. And there are challenger banks starting. But as you say, it's a quasi-monopoly.
But I've spoken to people in the banking world about this, and the difficulty with setting up a challenger bank is, first of all, the regulation to set up a bank is extraordinarily complex. The capital requirements for a new bank are much higher than for an existing bank. And because these people are deemed to be higher risk, the due diligence you've got to do is enormously expensive, and therefore they're only worth doing if they're Nigel Farage scale of wealth. It's not worth doing for the local charity that has £500 in its account.
Right. Which is why I think until you can get these sort of market alternatives to allow that market to work, the amount of regulation, exactly as you say, has surely to be pulled back. It's not like all the excess regulation that's been coming into the financial sector since, say, 2008 has done us any good.
So we've heard it here first. James Price has become a big state regulator. There we go. Anyway, we're very lucky. A Treasury spokesman has said debanking is wrong, which is why we've put protections in place for millions of people and small businesses. Under the new rules, customers will receive at least 90 days' notice and an explanation for any account closure, strengthening protections which prohibit banks from discriminating against someone based on their political opinions. Well, I'm glad they're doing that because I was heavily involved when I was a minister in pushing that forward. It shows you how long it takes to get anything done in this country, because I ceased being a minister in 2022. Anyway, in a moment.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. That is
Well, protests are erupting in Minneapolis after the fatal shooting of a woman by an agent of President Trump's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Many are expressing anger at the use of force and others supporting law enforcement's response to the woman's actions. Who is right?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
The cold winds and the snow not just confined to the UK. In and around the Mediterranean, pretty blustery, and some heavy snow likely over the Alps. First really big dumps for some here of the winter. Some showery rain for the Algarve. It's generally fine in the Canaries. Showery rain moving into Italy and across Croatia and further south too for Greece. We'll continue to see the weather pretty mixed in Italy with further showers and some gusty cold winds to come. The weather remains pretty fine in Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, very good evening to you. This is your GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Storm Goretti is battering the southern half of the UK, bringing heavy rain, some significant snow and damagingly strong winds to the southwest of the UK in particular. The low itself is tracking its way eastwards across southern parts, bringing a lot of unsettled weather. With that, there are a number of warnings out, including an amber for snow as we go through the night across Wales and the Midlands, but particularly a rare red warning for parts of Cornwall where gusts are exceeding 80 to 100 miles per hour, leading to some severe disruption here. As we go overnight, Goretti makes its way eastwards. As a result, the strongest winds in the southwest, they drop out, but we see further windy weather across southern counties, and that snow continues to build up across central parts with a lot of rain elsewhere across the south. Temperatures are dropping to around freezing across southern places. Further north with drier, clearer weather, temperatures similar to last night dropping into negative double figures across some places. Then through tomorrow, it's staying wet across eastern parts. There could even be some winteriness mixed in with the rain here, but nonetheless that rain could lead to some further flooding and travel disruption. Drier elsewhere, just a few showery outbreaks of rain, sleet and hill snow here and there. Maybe some glimmers of sunshine, particularly towards the west, and temperatures for most on the low side. A chilly, cold day generally, especially in the north. Another cold day to come as we go into Saturday. Mostly dry, mostly bright for many places. Some showery bursts towards the west and also towards the east. Then worth bearing in mind later on as we go through the weekend, while Sunday starts dry and largely cold, we are going to see a weather system coming in from the west. And as that bashes into that cold air that we have across us, well, there's the potential for some further disruptive snow. We'll have more on that nearer the time. That's it for me. I'll see you again soon.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, the mail mogs have come in as we were discussing debanking. Francine says they don't just debank, they freeze the account, hold on to your money and don't tell you why. It's exactly the same as energy suppliers taking what they want from your account, and they have realised it's a very profitable thing to do. Sounds pretty crooked to me. And James says, if we ever have the misfortune of getting digital IDs, I worry this problem will get much, much worse. So protests have erupted in the American city of Minneapolis after an incident showing the fatal shooting of a woman in her car. And you can see the pictures on your screen now. Concentrate on what happens. Watch carefully. They're going up to the car reverses, and it now heads off, and it's immediately after that that the shots are fired by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE agents, during an enforcement operation. Federal authorities say the woman, identified as Renee Nicole Good, tried to weaponize her vehicle and run over officers, prompting what they have said is self-defense. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, spoke from the White House earlier this evening.
This was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. Media wants to tell the truth. They ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE. I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers.
But local leaders, eyewitnesses and the city's mayor dismissed the administration's version of events after viewing the footage himself. As ICE operations increase under President Trump's immigration crackdown and an FBI investigation commences, the killing has led to another national argument over law enforcement tactics and the use of force. So who is in the right? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined now by the US political commentator Nora Lee Knudsen. Nora, thank you very much for coming in.
Wonderful to be here.
These questions are always very difficult, aren't they? Because although we've got a clip of it,
yes,
it's no audio, you don't know what's being said, the car seems to reverse and then speed off.
Right.
That's not a clever thing to do if you've got men with guns around you, is it?
You're absolutely right. Firstly, let me say this is a tragedy on both sides, not only for Renee Good, but for the ICE officer involved in the deadly shooting. Now, I always stand with law and order and the ICE and the Customs Patrol agents that enforce it. But that also means you must stand tough on the rules by which they must operate. And let us remember that the law is very clear that you are not allowed to shoot at a fleeing or moving vehicle unless there is no other alternative to protect your life if you think it is in lethal danger. And now this rule started in about the 70s because there used to be rape, stray bullets going and people being killed that were innocent. And there would also be bystanders. If you killed somebody behind the wheel, the car would then lose control. And killings went down as a result of this. Now, at question here is whether or not his life was truly at risk. As an individual, and I'm not sure if you would do the same thing, if I see a car coming towards me, my instinct for self-defense is to get out of the way. And what I believe people are saying is there was an opportunity to do that. Now, if we understand the context of this ICE agent, he himself had been involved in a car incident where he was dragged. And this was 6 months ago. He got 33 stitches. So I can understand why he may have had poor judgment, given the previous experience. But still, it doesn't excuse the high standard for using deadly force.
Because in the pictures that we've seen in the video, the car does seem to come very close to clipping one of the ICE officers. I think they're being shown again. So the car wasn't meekly stopping and obeying the orders of the law enforcement people.
You're absolutely right. But while they have the right to arrest somebody, they don't have the right to arrest them using fatal force.
Okay, and that's really important.
And you can see the license plate. So you could have just let the car drive off, and you could have then identified them using the license plate. There were other tactics to use.
So the police in America are not allowed to shoot people who they think are fleeing criminals?
They are not allowed to shoot a fleeing vehicle unless their life is at risk and there is no other alternative for self-defense.
And one of the interesting things about this is the commentary that's come out immediately afterwards.
Right.
If this had happened in this country, we wouldn't be able to talk about it. I happen to think that's pretty disgraceful, but let's leave that to one side. But even if we were allowed to talk about it, all the politicians would say is this needs to be investigated, we've got to wait and see, it's too early to say, da-di-da-di-dum. In America, the Republicans are coming out, and I know you're a Republican, actually.
Yes, I am. I'm a conservative.
But by and large, Republicans are coming out saying this is all absolutely fine, shoot away. And the Democrats are coming out and saying this is effectively murder. This is very interesting that law enforcement has become so politicised. What's been the lead up to this? What's created that atmosphere in America?
Well, if we recall in 2020, you had the George Floyd incident, which wasn't far from where this...
Which was also in Minneapolis.
Which was also Minneapolis, just a few miles from where this incident occurred. And clearly, the immigration issue is a hot topic. For myself, growing up on the border to Mexico, it is important that you have law and order, but it is also important that you have the public trust. So we must have an investigation as to what truly transpired. And if the agent involved in the fatal shooting had a video, to be able to have access to that and to understand, was he really at risk? But remember, federal agents actually have immunity. As long as they're operating within the course of their duty, they generally have immunity. So I don't expect anything to happen to the ICE agent. But then let's think about what is the training that they're given.
So the ICE agent has immunity even if his life wasn't at risk. It wouldn't go through the courts. It wouldn't be decided by a jury.
Generally speaking, the federal agents will be protected. If they were charged by the state and it was criminal, that would be entirely different. But as we understand, the FBI is not allowing the state to get involved.
And the FBI has that authority. It can override state law enforcement.
I don't know the exact rules, but generally the FBI will.
Because interestingly, in this country, we had a very similar case where the police officer concerned, an armed policeman, was found not guilty after a jury trial when he had shot somebody who was in a car that was trying to escape because it was thought that officers' lives were at risk and the car was being used to run them over. And this happened a few months ago. And so these things can happen.
Of course.
And it's a tremendously fine line. Do you think it's a good thing that it's been so politicised, or would it be better to try and examine it in the cold light of day and work out whether it was genuinely a life-threatening incident or whether actually it was something that could have been done without lethal force?
I think what's important to examine, one, was it generally life-threatening? But I also think in split seconds, we can all have poor judgment. You or I could have done the exact same thing, even though I sit here today saying I would have just moved out of the way. Who knows what you or I would have done in that instance. But I think it's important to examine the rules and how the officers are trained, because they're supposed to de-escalate the situation, not escalate the situation. And this individual, Renee Good, was not known to be a target of ICE. She was not a criminal. She was a legal American citizen. Clearly, she was protesting by blockading them with her car. But then she was fleeing when they tried to open the door.
But in America, you've got the right to protest, you've got the First Amendment, that's perfectly legal.
Yes.
So there does seem one thing to me that is very clear. When I'm next in America, if a policeman with a gun asks me to do something, I've got a feeling I might just do it. Anyway,
you're absolutely right.
Thank you. I quite like the fact our police aren't armed, but America's different in many ways. Thank you very much. Anyway, in a moment...
Nigel Farage is a snake oil salesman.
The single greatest threat is the agenda of Nigel Farage.
We must call his scheme racist.
A war of words has broken out between Rachel Reeves and Reform. The Chancellor accused Nigel Farage of racism for wanting to prioritise British-born people for welfare, and Zia Youssef hit back by calling Ms Reeves an ethno-nationalist, as the row escalated into absurdity.
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
Needs to
stop.
You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Another war of words has erupted after Chancellor Rachel Reeves accused Nigel Farage of racism over Reform's opposition to lifting the two-child benefit cap. Mr Farage says the policy would benefit large numbers of foreign-born families and argues welfare should prioritise British-born households, prompting Ms Reeves to accuse him of policy-making based on skin colour. Reform has hit back, with its policy chief, Zia Yusuf, the Scottish-born son of Sri Lankan immigrants, accusing the Chancellor of ethno-nationalism, claiming she is equating Britishness with race. So is Reform exposing hypocrisy on the left, or has the debate descended into political theatre? And when will Labour understand that relentless personal attacks on Nigel Farage do not work as a tactic? Well, I'm joined now by my panel, Lord Cryer and James Price. I've got to come to you first, John. Obviously you have certain connections to this.
Yeah.
But that's not the bit I want to focus on.
Yeah.
I want to focus on political tactics. Because if I were giving friendly advice to the Labour Party, I would say don't go for personal attacks, go for how Reform might be able to govern and what it's doing in local government, and make people think about what a reform operation would look like.
But I think that's probably true. I mean, just going back to what Rachel said, I think what happened was Nigel made a comment about raising the two-child cap and how it might... I think what he said was Reform will vote against... Reform MPs will vote against this because it will give benefits to a lot of foreign-born children. And she was responding to that. I mean, I just think he's wrong. But she was responding to that, so to some extent, understandably. But
there is a difference between foreign-born children and racism, isn't there?
Oh, yeah,
because there are a lot of people of different races who are...
I think they're reading, the Reform are reading something into that she wasn't saying and had no intention of saying. I've got plenty of mixed race relatives who were all born in this country. But anyway, going back to the personal attacks, I mean, personal attacks never really work. And if you think of the personal attacks that have been mounted over the years on various figures, you know, from my point of view, it was people on the Labour side, and I think when you get that kind of attack, and I'm thinking of Michael Foot, for instance, because he was subjected to some appalling personal attacks. We were told that Corbyn had been treated worse by the press than any previous Labour leader. Well, there's some pretty stiff competition there, and Michael Foot probably had the worst deal. I think probably a lot of people, it wasn't altogether just the Conservative Party, actually, it was the press who was sort of out in a feeding frenzy. But I think a lot of people probably felt a degree of revulsion, which then fuels a cynicism generally about politics.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, I think if you look back to the 1990s, lots of personal attacks on Conservative MPs. Yes, Labour won in 1997, but it has created a long-standing atmosphere that every politician is basically a crook who has his nose in the snout.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I'll quote I'll quote the Blessed Margaret. You know, she said that she would always cheer up immensely when someone resorted to personal attacks because it meant they didn't have a single good policy argument left and that she was winning the argument. I think that's right. I think what's happened is, exactly as you say, as things have got nastier, I think they are nastier than they used to be in previous generations before that, we've seen the rise of social media and round-the-clock news and these sorts of things that gives a sort of short-term benefit of you get the attention of, oh, you've said this terrible thing, let's go and ask you more questions, the rest of it. What effect does that have on high-quality people from all walks of life thinking they might want to get involved in politics? They'll look at that and run a million miles. And therefore, I think the general standard of people getting involved is lower, because why do you want to be accused of all these awful things you aren't if you just want to help the country out?
Well, because there is a line, isn't there, that if you say two-tier Keir, that is an attack on his policy approach. If you accuse him of U-turns, that is a policy approach. But sometimes that trips over into personal attacks. But if you just say, Yarbu sucks, the Prime Minister's a rotter, nobody cares. They just think you're silly. Is that fair?
I think that's fair to an extent, and you do have to, I think, twist the knife occasionally to try and make the point and cut through if you're talking about this from a comms perspective. But I do think it is self-defeating because then you can't get any positive arguments out there at all. It would be lovely, and GBNews does this, and very few other outlets do, to have any kind of positive story. And you know, there's that great thing in that 2016 debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton, and they asked to say, can you say something nice about your opponent? And Trump shocked everybody by saying some really lovely things about Hillary Clinton that she then didn't reciprocate.
I had this rather splendidly when I was standing for Parliament in 2010 on the Points West political debate, and my Labour opponent said no, he couldn't think of a single nice thing to say about me.
And it's so self-defeating.
It didn't do him any good. But
it is self-defeating.
I defeated him then, and he then defeated me last time round, so everything evened out in the end.
But, I mean, this has been around forever, of course. Neville Chamberlain was one of the worst when it comes to personal attacks. He employed, you might have heard of this man, Joe Ball, who was employed by Chamberlain. Joe Ball was employed to gather poison about mainly Tory MPs, right. Because amongst the Tory party in Parliament then, there were some young MPs, many of whom were already in the army, by the way, who were very, very devoted anti-Nazis. The anti-fascist coalition in Parliament tended to be younger Conservatives, Labour, and to some extent Liberal. So Joe Ball collected information about the private lives of these MPs, many of whom were gay. And they showed immense courage because it didn't stop them standing up to Chamberlain, which just shows it doesn't work.
Doesn't in the end work. The one thing that does work, which certainly harmed Michael Foot and indeed Jeremy Corbyn, is ultimately ridicule. If people begin to say that they're simply not serious leaders, that is very politically powerful. Yeah, it is. And actually, when it comes to... I'm not comparing anybody you mentioned to the far right or the far left. But P.G. Wodehouse was brilliant at ridiculing people. You remember the character of Roderick Spode, the leader of the Black Shorts Party?
Do you mean Black Shirts? No, sir, the Black Shorts, I'm afraid.
We can't go on to P.G. Wodehouse, sadly, much though I would like to devote a whole programme to the great man. And now, for the silliest excuse from a failing business since British Rail complained about the wrong type of snow. The boss of South East Water says working from home is to blame for 24,000 homes in Tunbridge Wells being left without water, so disgusted for more than a week. And that post-COVID lifestyle changes have affected the system because people are at home using water. Despite these failings, the CEO rated their performance as 6 to 8 out of 10. The company's CEO, David Hinton, said, "We know in recent years the customers' views of water has changed. Some, but not all, has been due to altered commuting habits. Our priority is improving South East Water in the future." Anyway, that's all for me. I'm heading down to Somerset in spite of the storm, so we'll get Patrick Christie's to keep us up to date with what's going on. I'll listen to you on the journey down.
Well, thank you very much, Jacob. Huge breaking news tonight. Protests have been reported in every single one of Iran's 31 provinces. The Ayatollah is probably going to have to get out now if he wants to. We'll bring you all of the updates on that. Closer to home now, of course, we're going to be talking about the world's worst diversity scheme. The Metropolitan Police wanted to do a diversity drive, and they ended up employing a black man who happened to be a child rapist. Let's be honest with you, it doesn't get any worse than that. The end of DEI. That's next.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. This is your GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Storm Goretti is battering the southern half of the UK, bringing heavy rain, some significant snow and damagingly strong winds to the southwest of the UK in particular. The low itself